Before we begin, if you love gripping HFY sci-fi stories where humanity defies the odds, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Now, let's step into the darkness of Gravith 9. The transmission cut out in a scream. Not a static glitch. Not interference. A scream. The kind that tears through comms like broken glass, then drops into silence so deep it feels alive. Cale Rourke leaned forward on the observation deck, the pale green holographic playback dancing across his scarred face. 4 hunters, elite, renowned for culling creatures most civilizations avoided entirely, had entered Gravith 9 3 days ago. Their signal vanished less than 4 minutes after touchdown. The council had replayed that clip 27 times. They still couldn't explain why no bodies were recovered, why the forest had closed behind them like a living organism. The apex predator, someone whispered behind him. Cale didn't need to turn to know the voice belonged to an overconfident council attaché. Every species had their myths. Gravith 9's predator wasn't a myth. He'd seen it. The council chamber buzzed like a nest of wasps. Holographic bodies of representatives shimmered in circular tiers, each one trying to speak louder than the next. A dozen languages collided in the air, all laced with fear. For centuries, the apex predator had been a whispered deterrent, something no one dared to engage. Now it had made a statement. It hadn't just defended its territory. It had erased the best hunters in the galaxy without leaving a single trace. Commander Rourke. The single, clipped address sliced through the noise. Cale straightened slowly, boots clicking against polished obsidian floors. Counselor Threx floated at the center of the chamber, a serpentoid species with skin like wet marble and a gaze colder than space. You are the only living being to have walked off Gravith 9 alive. We require your expertise. Cale didn't flinch. He'd heard this tone before, the mix of desperation and arrogance that only politicians carried. You don't require my expertise, he said, voice low, steady. You require a scapegoat with a pulse. Murmurs rippled across the room. Threx's eyes narrowed to slits. We require answers. The hunters of Zarian Prime are gone. The apex predator has grown bold. If it can take hunters, it can take worlds. You know that terrain. You know its patterns. You will lead the recovery team. Cale almost laughed. Recovery. A gentle word for a suicide mission. He remembered the mud of Gravith 9 swallowing men whole. He remembered the forest moving without wind, the soundless steps of something that shouldn't have been able to think, but did. He remembered the moment it let him live. Refuse, Threx said softly, and I'll make sure every human colony in council space sees you as a deserter who fled from a war they never saw. Cale tilted his head. Threats were currency here, cheap and plentiful. But the image of the hunter's final transmission replayed in his mind again. 4 armed warriors, breathing hard, scanning the dark, then a blur. One whisper, it's here. Then nothing. I'll go, Cale said finally. Silence spread like frost. Even the boldest council members stilled at those words. Humans didn't volunteer for Gravith 9 twice. He turned to leave, but a low mechanical voice followed him. Commander Rourke. Do you seek vengeance? It was the ship's AI liaison, its blue projection hovering near the door. Cale paused. No, his jaw tightened. I want to know why it let me live. Outside the chamber, the starport loomed like a steel cathedral. Ships glittered like razors beneath the dim blue light. Cale moved through the loading bay with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd walked too many battlefields. A 2-being recon unit waited, a wiry Krillin with skin like obsidian shards, and a stocky Veruan soldier with tusks protruding like broken spears. They didn't look at him with respect. They looked at him like a man already buried. You're the human, the Veruan rumbled. Cale strapped on his field harness, the weight of it settling like old armor. That's what they keep telling me. They say you saw it, the Krillin hissed. And lived. Cale met the alien's narrow black eyes. Yeah, I saw it. That's the problem. The Krillin glanced away. Fear smelled different on every species, but Cale could always tell when it was in the room. Gravith 9 didn't care who you were, how many medals you'd earned, or what kind of armor you wore. It didn't hunt for food. It hunted because something in its nature said you do not belong here. The dropship's engines roared to life, slicing through the quiet tension. Cale stepped aboard, ignoring the briefing screen's flashing casualty projections. His fingers brushed the holster at his side, not because he thought his weapon would save him, but because muscle memory was all a soldier had when reason ran out. As the ramp sealed, the ship's AI spoke again, its voice almost curious. Statistically, your survival probability is 3.1%. Kale smirked faintly. That's 3 more than last time. The ship tore through orbit, Gravith 9 rising like a wound against the black. Red jungles bled into endless mist. Storm bands twisted around the planet's equator like a predator's coils. Kale closed his eyes for a heartbeat. The scent of wet earth. The low, guttural breathing that wasn't wind. The weight of unseen eyes. He opened them as they entered atmosphere. The council had briefed him on protocols, contingencies, evacuation routes. Useless. This wasn't a mission you planned for. It was a world that planned for you. The Krillin muttered something in its native tongue, an old superstition Kale guessed. The Veruin checked his heavy rifle 3 times in silence. Kale kept his gaze on the thickening mist below. No one spoke as the landing gear touched down. For a moment nothing moved outside. No wind. No sound. Just the jungle breathing in. The AI's voice lowered to a whisper as if even it feared being heard. Commander. Scans show no heat signatures from the missing hunters. No biological matter. No mechanical debris. Kale felt a chill crawl up his spine. It cleaned the field. The Krillin frowned. What does that mean? It means, Kale said, sliding his weapon free, it didn't kill them for defense. It erased them for effect. A distant sound rolled through the mist, deep, rhythmic, deliberate. Not an animal. Not random. A message. Kale's pulse quickened, but not from fear. It was something worse. Recognition. The apex predator was waiting. And this time it wasn't hunting to kill. It was hunting to talk. The Veruin shifted uneasily. Why are we here, human? Kale stepped onto the red soil, the mist curling around his boots like claws. Because it wanted me back. The dropship's engines powered down, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the steady thrum beneath their feet, the pulse of the jungle itself. Kale didn't glance back. He didn't need to. Gravith 9 was already watching. The first step into the treeline always felt like crossing a line you couldn't uncross. Kale walked forward anyway. Because whatever message the predator carved into those vanished hunters, it had written the rest of it in his name. The mist swallowed sound. It wasn't fog in the ordinary sense. It moved like something alive, folding around shapes and swallowing edges until the jungle itself looked like a memory fading from the mind. Kale adjusted the seal on his rebreather, the visor display flickering with faint interference as if the air itself wanted to disrupt their presence. Behind him, the Krillin crept forward on light feet, eyes darting, and the Veruin's heavier steps crunched faintly against the wet ground. Each sound seemed too loud. Too visible. They'd only been planetside for 12 minutes, but the jungle already pressed against them like a hand on the back of the neck. Motion sensors are unreliable, the Krillin whispered, tapping a glowing disc at his wrist. They're static on every perimeter frequency. Kale crouched, brushing his fingers against the soil. The ground was warm, not from sunlight but from something underneath, something pulsing faintly like a buried heart. He could feel the vibration through his gloves. Static's not interference, he murmured. It's displacement. Something's moving out there. The Veruin tightened his grip on the rifle. Hunters. Kale's jaw flexed. No. Hunters don't move like that. The mist shifted as though it had heard him. A low ripple passed through the treeline, bending branches without wind. Leaves whispered, not as they fell but as though they were inhaling. The Krillin lifted his weapon, hands shaking slightly despite the bravado he'd shown at the starport. Kale didn't blame him. Bravery had a way of peeling off fast on Gravith 9. They advanced in a staggered formation, the drone hovering above them with a faint hum, its scanning light piercing the murk in pale cones. The jungle floor changed with each step, roots twisting into shapes that resembled bones, vines that looked like veins pulsing beneath their boots. No birds. No insects. Not even the distant drone of ambient life. The silence was wrong. Kale remembered that silence. It came when the predator watched. The Krillin broke the quiet. This place is cursed. Kale's voice was flat. Cursed places don't eat elite hunter squads. Their first clue lay half buried beneath a thicket of red ferns. Kale knelt and pulled it free, a hunter's helmet, scorched down one side, visor shattered. Not ripped. Melted. Whatever had struck it hadn't used claws. It had used precision. Veruin lowered himself beside Kale, tusks shifting as his breath grew heavier. Still no bodies. Not bodies, Kale said softly. Not even blood. It's clean. The Krillin's hand trembled slightly on the trigger. Predators don't clean their kills. This one does. Kale turned the helmet over. Something had scored the inside, A single claw mark pressed from the inside out, like the hunter had clawed their own way free before disappearing. He didn't need to explain what that meant. They all felt the weight of it. A distant sound drifted through the fog, a slow, deliberate thud. Then another. The jungle trembled with each impact. Kale raised a fist. The team froze. The sound wasn't random movement. It was a pattern. Measured. Intelligent. The drone's beam swung toward the noise. The mist seemed to push back, swallowing the light before it could touch the trees. A shape moved just beyond perception. Not fast. Slow. Patient. Target? The Veruin asked under his breath. Target's not interested in being found, Kale said. It's showing us it's here. A low, resonant growl vibrated through the air. Not a roar but a tone, like something speaking in the language of fear. The Krillin flinched. Veruin's tusks clicked together. Kale simply listened. He remembered that sound from the first time. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Branches cracked in the mist, not close, not far. Exactly the distance the predator liked to keep, near enough to be felt, far enough to remain a ghost. We're being led, Kale whispered. The Krillin's eyes snapped to him. Led where? That's what I want to find out. The forest narrowed into a natural corridor, walls of knotted roots rising like ribs around them. The air grew warmer, wet with the smell of soil and something faintly metallic. The drone's readings blinked erratically. Kale saw what the others didn't, the marks on the trees. Not random scratches. Symbols. Deliberate carvings. The predator had marked this path long before they'd arrived. Kale touched one of the carvings. Smooth edges. Fresh. The Veruin shifted behind him. You've been here before. You know this terrain. I survived it, Kale corrected. I didn't understand it. A flicker of movement. The Krillin swung his rifle up, finger tightening on the trigger, but Kale's hand clamped over the barrel before the shot went off. No, Kale said. In the murk, 2 pinpoints of light appeared. Then 2 more. 4 eyes. Watching. No body visible. Just the glimmer of something ancient and unafraid. Veruin muttered something under his breath that Kale didn't catch. The Krillin whispered, "Why isn't it attacking?" Kale didn't answer. He was asking himself the same question. Last time it had stalked him like prey. This time it was holding ground. He could feel its gaze on him in a way that wasn't animal. It was measuring him. The drone moved a fraction closer, its light cutting through another layer of mist, but the moment the beam touched the eyes, they vanished. Not like something retreating. Like something never there. Veruin exhaled sharply. It's playing with us. Kale shook his head. No. It's deciding. They followed the marked path deeper, the oppressive canopy overhead blotting out the faint daylight. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. Kale could hear their breathing, the faint hum of the drone, the thud of his own pulse in his ears. The jungle here was different. Controlled. Like stepping into a cathedral where the walls listened. The Krillin stumbled on something. Kale turned and saw it, a hunter's insignia plate half sunk into the soil. No blood, no body. Just the plate and the faint outline of something having been dragged, or walked, deeper into the darkness. Kale's gut twisted. The predator didn't kill for food. It killed to make a point. And sometimes it didn't kill at all. Ahead, the mist thinned just enough to reveal a clearing. Red soil, no vegetation, perfectly circular. A single object lay in the center, a hunter's gauntlet placed neatly on a flat stone, the claws of its metal hand pointing toward them. The Krillin whispered, "What is this?" "A message," Kale replied. "It wants me to follow." The Veruin spat on the ground. "We should turn back. Call in the fleet. Burn this planet clean." Kale didn't take his eyes off the gauntlet. You can't burn what doesn't fear fire. He stepped forward. The mist shifted around him like it recognized his scent. The others hesitated but followed, the drone hovering close. Each step into the clearing felt like walking into a mouth that would close behind them. Kale stopped at the edge of the stone. The gauntlet was spotless. The jungle didn't leave anything spotless. The predator had placed it there. A gift. A lure. A claim. The sound returned, soft at first, then rising beneath their feet. A low rhythmic pulse. It wasn't just behind them anymore. It was everywhere. Kale slowly lifted his gaze to the treeline. For eyes burned faintly in the distance again. Not moving. Watching. Waiting. He felt it then as clear as breath against his neck. It could have killed them already. But it hadn't. The predator wasn't hunting them. It was leading them somewhere. Kale's grip tightened on his weapon. Not out of fear, but out of the cold understanding that whatever waited ahead wasn't just a creature. It was intent. Behind him, the Krillin whispered, "Why us?" Kale stepped closer to the treeline, the red soil whispering beneath his boots. "Because it wants to talk to me." The eyes blinked once, then vanished into the mist, and the jungle exhaled. The jungle thinned without warning, as if it had grown bored of concealing itself. The mist peeled back in coiling ribbons, revealing a basin carved into the earth like an ancient wound. Stones jutted up in curved arcs, each marked with the same deliberate carvings Kale had seen along the path, this time deeper, more intricate. The air here was warmer, pulsing with a low hum that resonated through his ribs. The drone's sensors flickered uselessly. Nothing digital worked in the heart of the predator's domain. Kale raised a hand. The Krillin froze. The Veruin shifted his weight but kept his weapon trained on the treeline. None of them spoke. The silence wasn't merely the absence of sound, it was the presence of something vast listening back. At the far end of the basin, a shape emerged. Massive, deliberate, moving with the kind of grace that only came from absolute confidence. The apex predator stepped into view. Kale had remembered it in fragments: 4 black eyes, armor grown from bone, a gait that was both alien and purposeful. But memory hadn't done it justice. Up close, it radiated a presence that didn't belong in this era of machines and steel. The thing wasn't hiding. It was standing as though it owned every inch of the ground beneath their boots. The Krillin's breath hitched audibly. The Veruin tightened his grip on the rifle but didn't fire. Even soldiers who'd faced planetary bombardments hesitated when staring at a being that didn't need ships to conquer. Kale kept his weapon lowered, not out of trust but because he knew how this creature reacted to aggression. Last time he'd been here, firing first had gotten half his squad torn apart in the dark. The predator moved forward slowly, and only then did Kale notice what it carried. Dangling gently from its massive, bone-plated jaws was a small figure wrapped in a torn survival blanket. A human child. The moment hit like a concussion. The Krillin took a sharp step forward. "Is that?" Kale cut him off with a glance. His pulse hammered against the inside of his skull. The drone hovered lower, scanning automatically, but the readings were erratic. No traps. No visible injuries. The child's small chest rose and fell. Alive. The predator lowered its head with calculated precision, placing the child on the soft red soil as if setting down something fragile it didn't want to break. Then it straightened to its full height, towering over them, silent and unmoving. Kale's mind spun backward through years. The transport crash. The evacuation protocols. The lost civilian manifests. A list of names burned into memory. One of those names belonged to a child no one had ever found. He stared down at the tiny form. Mud smeared across pale skin. Hair matted. A locket still clutched in a small hand. The Krillin's voice cracked. Why would it bring a human? Because this wasn't a random hunt. This was deliberate. Kale stepped forward slowly, hands raised. The predator didn't flinch, didn't retreat. Its 4 eyes tracked him with an unnerving stillness. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, but something colder cut through the fear. The creature wasn't baring its teeth. It wasn't displaying dominance. It was waiting. He knelt beside the child, fingers hovering before making contact. Warm skin. Steady pulse. She stirred faintly, a small hoarse sound slipping from her lips. The sound shouldn't have broken him, but it did. Dad. The Krillin made a noise halfway between disbelief and pity. The Veruin looked away. Kale kept his hand on the child's shoulder, steadying his own breath. She wasn't his daughter. But she recognized his species. After years alone with this creature, any human face must have felt like safety. The predator shifted its weight, a faint growl vibrating through the air. Not a threat. A statement. Kale rose slowly, meeting its gaze. Why? He whispered under his breath. It wasn't a question meant for the others. The creature tilted its head, almost imperceptibly. Its movements were too deliberate to be animal. This wasn't a beast returning prey. This was a guardian returning something it considered valuable. The Krillin's voice broke the moment. We need to call in the extraction team now. Council will pay fortunes for this data. A living human cub on Gravith 9? They'll dissect everything. The predator growled sharply. The Krillin flinched. Kale didn't take his eyes off the creature. He understood. Not the words but the intention. The hunters who'd come before hadn't disappeared by accident. They tried to take the child. And the apex predator had erased them for it. This isn't just territory, Kale said quietly. It's protection. The Veruin stepped forward, tusks glinting. Protection? It's a killer human. That thing tore through hunter squads like air. Kale turned, his expression carved in stone. Because they tried to take what it was already protecting. The drone's light swept over the carvings on the stones. The markings repeated the same looping pattern again and again, surrounding the basin like a ritual perimeter. Cale didn't need to know the language. He could read the meaning. This wasn't a nest. It was a boundary line. The child stirred again, eyes blinking open. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered there, then terror as she saw the predator. But the creature didn't move. It only exhaled a low rumbling sound, almost like a purr. Her breathing calmed, her tiny fingers curling around the locket. She wasn't just used to its presence. She trusted it. Cale's throat tightened. You've been keeping her alive. The predator didn't answer in words, but its stance told him everything. The Krillin raised his calm, Council needs to know this. If they... Cale moved faster than thought, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting the device out of his hand. If you call the Council, he said, voice cold, they'll send warships. And this planet will burn. Including her. The Krillin stared at him, stunned. Are you out of your mind? That thing is. Cale's voice cut through like a blade. That thing protected a human child when everyone else wrote her off as dead. The Veruin watched in heavy silence. Even he couldn't ignore the way the creature had lowered its head when Cale approached. Predators didn't bow. Not to prey. Cale turned back to the creature. For a long moment, human and alien faced each other across the red soil. One scarred by years of war, the other forged by a world that killed everything else that walked on it. Yet neither moved. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. He finally spoke, not in any shared language but with tone alone. I understand. The predator tilted its head again and then, with a fluid, almost ceremonial motion, it stepped back. Not fleeing. Not attacking. Allowing. The Krillin muttered something venomous under his breath. The Veruin kept his weapon low. Cale knelt again, lifting the child gently into his arms. She was light, frighteningly light. The predator watched every movement but didn't interfere. When Cale straightened, the creature's four eyes narrowed slightly, then softened, not with human emotion but with something deeper. Recognition. He felt it then, a chill that wasn't fear but understanding. The predator wasn't here to end their lives. It had brought him here for one reason. To hand over what it had kept safe. Cale met its gaze. I'll get her out. The growl that answered him wasn't a threat. It was trust wrapped in warning. For the first time since landing, Cale felt the jungle ease its grip. The mist didn't claw at him now. It shifted aside as if giving permission. Behind him, the Krillin and Veruin exchanged uncertain glances. Ahead of him, the apex predator stood unmoving at the edge of its domain, watching as Cale carried the child toward the treeline. The unspoken understanding lingered in the air like heat before a storm. This wasn't the end of their meeting. It was the beginning of something larger. Cale adjusted his grip on the child and stepped into the mist. The predator followed. Not as an enemy. As a shadow. The wind shifted when they reached the ridge. It wasn't real wind, Gravith 9 didn't breathe in ordinary rhythms, but Cale felt it moving across his skin like the prelude to a storm. The mist below the treeline stretched toward the landing zone like pale, reaching fingers. His pulse stayed steady, but he could feel the child's small heartbeat against his chest, rapid and fragile. She clung to him wordlessly, as if her body already understood what her mind couldn't. Behind him, the Krillin trudged through the roots, muttering under his breath. The Veruin moved with the blunt caution of someone who'd fought too many wars to trust silence. Above them, the drone flickered, struggling to keep its sensors clear in the thickening interference. The apex predator walked in the shadows just behind Cale, its massive frame nearly invisible in the red mist. Every step it took was deliberate, soundless. It could have disappeared into the jungle at any moment, but it didn't. It was following them. The dropship shimmered faintly through the fog ahead, its landing struts still slick with red soil. Cale's stomach tightened. He'd expected quiet extraction. But quiet didn't exist anymore. The first flash of metal came from the left flank, polished armor, black as oil. Enforcers. Not recovery crews. The Krillin froze. Council sent soldiers. Cale didn't answer. The truth lay in front of him, black shapes emerging from the mist like teeth from a closed jaw. 12 armored figures. Heavy rifles. Precision formation. Not rescue. Containment. The commander of the squad stepped forward, his voice cutting through the damp air. Commander Rourke, hand over the asset immediately. Cale adjusted the child against his chest. She's not an asset. Council protocols classify her as recovered property. We have orders to secure all organic material associated with Gravith 9. A low growl rolled through the mist behind him, not loud but deep enough to vibrate the ground beneath their feet. The enforcers shifted, weapons tightening in their grips. The predator stepped out of the shadows with quiet inevitability, 4 black eyes burning through the fog. Half the squad raised their rifles at once. Cale didn't move. "Don't," he said. His voice was even, but it carried a weight that stopped them. The commander's visor tilted toward the creature. "Target is confirmed. Apex class. Eliminate." The first shot didn't come from the soldiers. It came from the predator. One movement, too fast to follow, and the nearest enforcer was airborne, his armor crumpling like foil. The others reacted instantly, filling the air with staccato bursts of plasma. The mist exploded in white light and heat. Cale dropped to one knee, shielding the child with his body. The Veruin roared and fired into the treeline, not at the predator but at the soldiers trying to flank them. The Krillin swore viciously, ducking behind a root structure torn between firing and running. The predator moved like nothing built for war. It didn't dodge. It flowed. A single strike shattered 2 rifles. A second cut through armor as if it were paper. It wasn't fighting to flee. It was fighting to protect. Cale's throat burned with the weight of decision. If the predator fell here, the child would follow. If the soldiers got what they wanted, the council would dissect them both to understand why Gravith 9 had let a human live. He had no orders anymore. Only one choice. He grabbed the Krillin's discarded rifle and rose to his feet, firing a clean shot into the air. The sound cracked through the chaos. Every head turned toward him. "This is your last chance," Cale said, voice sharp enough to cut through the storm. "You touch her, you'll have to get through me. And it won't just be me you're fighting." The commander's voice came through the modulator, low and cold. "You've lost your mind, human." Cale took a step forward, the predator pacing to his side like a living shadow. "No. I just started remembering what it means to stand for something." The child whimpered softly against his chest, and it hit him harder than the gunfire. She'd already survived hell once. He wasn't about to let a different kind of hell claim her. The commander raised his hand to give the order. He never finished it. The predator struck with a soundless blur, grabbing the front-line soldier and hurling him into another. Plasma fire erupted. Cale ducked low and moved not away but toward the fight. He wasn't fighting for the council anymore. He was fighting for something older than that. The Veruin fell into step beside him, covering his flank without a word. Whatever doubts the alien had carried burned away in the gunfire. Even the Krillin finally joined in, swearing through clenched teeth as he fired at the enforcer's legs, not to kill but to keep them off balance. The predator tore through the remaining soldiers like a force of nature. Not unstoppable, Cale could see the blood on its bone plates, dark and thick, but unrelenting. The enforcers broke formation. One of them screamed something over comms. Then 2 went down in a single sweep of its arm. Cale reached the commander first. The man raised his weapon, but Cale slammed into him before he could fire, driving him back into the ship's ramp. Their helmets clashed. Cale ripped the commander's visor up and stared straight into his eyes. "She's a child," Cale growled. "You tell your council they'll have to burn a planet to get to her. And if they do that, they'll wake something they can't control." The commander spat blood. "The council doesn't negotiate with animals." Cale's voice went quieter, colder. "Neither does it understand them." A shadow passed over them both. The predator loomed behind Cale, close enough that the commander's eyes widened with something he hadn't shown all mission, real fear. Cale stepped back. The predator leaned in, its breath hot against the man's faceplate. It didn't strike. It simply stared, holding him still with the weight of its gaze. Then it turned and walked past him, as if sparing him was part of some ancient rule. Cale knew what it meant. The creature had drawn a line. Cross it again, and next time there wouldn't be anyone left to deliver a message. The remaining soldiers stumbled back toward the ship, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. The commander's jaw tightened as the ramp retracted, but his eyes never left the creature standing in the mist. Cale didn't watch the ship ascend. He only listened to the slow fade of the engines, the forest reclaiming its silence. The Veruin let out a low grunt, lowering his rifle. The Krillin sat down hard on a root, shaking. Cale adjusted the child's weight in his arms. She had fallen asleep, her head resting against his chest, untouched by the violence that had just burned the clearing. The predator stood a few paces away, blood streaking its plated shoulder, breathing steady. It didn't approach him this time. It didn't need to. Its gaze said everything. It had chosen not to destroy them. Cale met its eyes and understood the shift. They weren't enemies now. Not prey and hunter. They were something else, something the council wouldn't understand until it was too late. He looked down at the child, then back to the treeline. The war hadn't started yet, but its shadow was already here. The predator turned, vanishing into the mist as silently as it had appeared. Kale exhaled, feeling the jungle tighten around him again, this time not as a threat but as a warning. Above the canopy, the council's ship disappeared into the clouds. Below, a human soldier and an apex predator had drawn an invisible line in the dirt. And everyone who crossed it would pay the price. The night above Gravith 9 burned like a dark ocean with hidden teeth. The council's warships hung in orbit, black specks against the crimson stars, silent but bristling with intent. Kale stood at the shattered edge of the forward base, wind dragging the scent of blood and soil across the landing pads. The child slept behind reinforced walls under Veruin guard. The predator waited somewhere beyond the treeline, unseen but not gone. He could feel its presence in the way the jungle seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in years, Kale wasn't thinking like a soldier. He was thinking like someone with something to lose. And that made him dangerous. The Krillin limped toward him with a data pad, his usual sarcasm burned away by the day's violence. Council fleet just tripled in size. They're not here for negotiations. They're going to burn everything down until nothing's left to argue about. Kale didn't need the datapad. He could see it in the sky, the faint halo of orbiting war engines gathering like carrion birds. How long before they drop? 30 standard minutes? Maybe less. The Krillin glanced at the treeline. You think the beast will help us? Kale didn't answer. The question wasn't about the predator. It was about whether Kale could trust something the rest of the galaxy feared. And whether it could trust him back. The Veruin approached next, towering and silent, his armor streaked with dried plasma and jungle mud. His tusks glinted in the floodlight. We should flee. Kale turned to him slowly. And leave her to be dissected? The alien's throat rumbled. This is not our war. Kale stepped closer, voice tightening like a coiled wire. It is now. The Veruin held his stare for a long, heavy breath before looking away. In that silence, something shifted. It wasn't loyalty. It was shared inevitability. Kale walked toward the tree line. He didn't call out. He didn't need to. The air thickened, the jungle grew still, and then it appeared, emerging from the mist with the kind of silence that could only be learned by killers at the top of the chain. Its bone plates gleamed in the floodlight. Blood had dried dark across its left arm, but its movements were smooth, fluid, unbroken. Kale stopped 3 meters away. He didn't raise his hands this time. He didn't need to show submission or strength. The understanding between them was beyond gestures now. They're coming, Kale said quietly. Not hunters. An army. They'll burn this world to the crust if they think it means control. And they'll kill her. The predator tilted its massive head, eyes reflecting the light like polished obsidian. I don't know why you saved her, Kale continued. I don't know why you didn't kill me when you had the chance. But I know you care about what happens next. The predator stepped closer. Its breath was low and measured. It raised one clawed hand, not toward him but toward the sky, where the faint glow of the council fleet pulsed against the stars. Kale's jaw tightened. That was enough. The predator didn't fight for humanity. It didn't fight for council or war. It fought for its own code. And right now their codes aligned. The Krillin's voice cut through the calm, dropships inbound. 20, maybe more. Full strike wings. Kale turned toward the base. Then we hold. The predator's mandibles flared slightly, a soundless, alien snarl. Then it melted back into the darkness. Minutes later, the sky split open. The first wave of council dropships screamed through the cloud layer, their descent thrusters igniting the horizon in orange fire. Kale braced against the blast wave as they touched down beyond the perimeter. Enforcers poured out, black armor gleaming, rifles raised. The Veruin lifted a heavy plasma cannon onto his shoulder. We die fighting. No, Kale said. We live fighting. The predator struck first. It descended from the treeline like a living storm, slamming into the rear of the council formation. Soldiers screamed over comms as entire lines buckled. It didn't just kill. It dismantled their formation with surgical violence, moving faster than their sensors could track. Kale charged from the opposite side, leading the Krillin and Veruin through the smoke. Plasma fire lit the night like lightning. He moved with precision, not rage, every shot buying the child another heartbeat. Explosions tore through the perimeter as council forces tried to regroup. But they were fighting something they couldn't understand. One human who refused to obey and a creature that didn't bow to empires. The commander who'd faced Kale earlier emerged from the smoke, flanked by elite guards. His voice boomed over the comms. "Stand down, Rourke. The child belongs to the council." Kale stepped through the haze, plasma rifle low but ready. "You still don't get it? She doesn't belong to anyone." The commander raised his weapon. The predator landed behind Kale like a phantom, its claws slick with enemy blood. Soldiers hesitated. It wasn't just fear, it was the recognition that they were outmatched. Kale spoke into the comm, his voice steady. "Turn back now and you live. Push forward and you face something your council can't control." The commander sneered. "We control everything." He pulled the trigger. The predator moved faster. One sweeping motion and the commander's shot went wide, his arm bent at a grotesque angle. Kale didn't hesitate. His shot found the weak seam in the man's chest plate, and the commander fell with a sharp, final exhale. Panic rippled through the soldiers like a snapped tether. Some turned to flee. Others fired wildly. But the tide had already shifted. The predator roared, not a sound of rage but of claim. The jungle echoed it, carrying the sound into the night like a warning to every living thing. Kale advanced through the broken line, pulse hammering but mind sharp. The Krillin cut off a retreat line. The Veruin crushed a soldier's rifle with one hand and threw the man into the dirt. The last dropship tried to lift off. The predator leapt onto its hull, claws sinking through armor like fabric. One clean strike and its engines ruptured, the ship spiraling down into the mud with a violent hiss of steam. When silence finally returned, it came heavy and complete. Smoke curled around the shattered base. Dozens of council soldiers lay unconscious or dead. The warships above hung motionless, as if uncertain whether to press the assault or retreat from the impossible. Kale stood at the center of the battlefield, chest rising and falling. The predator faced him, their eyes meeting again. No words. No promises. Just an understanding forged in blood and defiance. He walked back toward the safe room. The child stirred when he entered, blinking sleepily, unaware of the storm that had raged for her sake. She reached for him without hesitation, small fingers brushing the fabric of his scorched uniform. Kale crouched beside her. "You're safe," he whispered. It wasn't entirely true. The council would regroup. More battles would come. But for now this moment was real. Outside, the predator climbed onto the highest root spire, gazing at the burning horizon. It didn't kneel. It didn't bow. But when the child peeked out the door and waved, the creature inclined its head, an apex predator acknowledging something no empire could command. Above them the council fleet began to pull back. Not in defeat but in caution. They had learned something tonight. Something dangerous. Kale looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of it settle into his bones. He wasn't just protecting a child. He'd declared war on the most powerful force in the galaxy. The predator roared one last time, the sound rolling through the jungle like a promise. And Kale didn't flinch. Because for the first time in a long time he wasn't standing alone.